April 1945, Northern Italy. The rain fell in thin needles as Maria Conti watched the American convoy approach through the shattered windows of the communications center. After 18 months serving as an Ausiliaria in Mussolini's Repubblica Sociale Italiana, the 23-year-old radio specialist knew surrender was inevitable. The Americans had broken through the Gothic Line 2 weeks earlier, advancing 11 kilometers daily through crumbling Italian defenses. 3 days without sleep had hollowed Maria's eyes as she transmitted final coordinates before destroying codebooks with methodical precision. Fascist propaganda had prepared her for the barbarism of American soldiers, rapists and murderers who would show no mercy to female auxiliaries. The RSI command had emphasized this repeatedly during her training at the Tradate Academy, where 267 women had graduated in her cohort. The first American she saw was younger than expected. His rifle pointed toward the doorway with professional detachment, not bloodlust. "Hands up," he said in mangled Italian. Maria complied, her uniform, the grey-green Sahariana jacket with brass buttons and the black fez cap of the Ausiliari, marking her as military personnel, not civilian. Outside, 14 other Ausiliari from her unit stood in the rain, hands raised. Military intelligence documents would later record 1,243 female auxiliaries captured during the final Italian campaign. They represented Mussolini's desperate mobilization. Women aged 18 to 40 performing communications, medical, and administrative functions for a collapsing regime. The American sergeant, clipboard protected from rain by plastic covering, recorded their unit designation with methodical efficiency. "Female soldiers?" he asked a translator with obvious skepticism. The Italian collaborator shrugged. "Comfort girls for fascist officers," he replied, mistranslating auxiliary with casual cruelty. The assessment, though inaccurate, would follow Maria through military documentation. American intelligence, despite thorough procedures, frequently misclassified auxiliary as prostitutes rather than legitimate military personnel. At the temporary detention center, a requisitioned school in Modena, Maria encountered American abundance for the first time. K rations distributed to prisoners contained 200 calories daily. The chocolate bar inside, Hershey's 2 ounces, individually wrapped, was the first chocolate Maria had tasted in 27 months. American medical personnel examined each prisoner. Maria's processing form, preserved in military archives, recorded female, 23, 5'4", 105 lbs, malnourished, no medical issues. Her interrogation, conducted through a translator whose Sicilian accent complicated communication, lasted 47 minutes. The transcript reveals American uncertainty about handling female prisoners. Subject denies comfort woman status, claims communication specialist, uniform and technical knowledge support claim. On April 17, 1945, Maria and 32 other auxiliary boarded an olive-drab GMC CC KW353 transport truck for transfer to the dedicated women's section at Detention Camp 334 near Pisa. The vehicle's bench seats, designed for 30 soldiers with equipment, provided cramped accommodation. Each prisoner received 1 wool blanket, despite spring temperatures averaging 12°. The journey covered 178 kilometers over bomb-damaged roads. As the truck passed Florence, Maria glimpsed American military efficiency that contradicted fascist propaganda. Supply convoys, hundreds of identical vehicles moving with coordinated precision. Field hospitals with proper equipment. Soldiers who appeared well-fed, well-equipped, and disciplined. This represented logistical capacity beyond anything she had witnessed in fascist forces, even during early war successes. Camp 334 appeared on the horizon after 7 hours of travel. The women's section, separated from male prisoners by double fencing, contained 14 wooden barracks, capacity 40 prisoners each. Current population, 427 female detainees, primarily civilians with fascist connections. Only 89 were uniformed auxiliary. As Maria descended from the truck, eyes adjusting to the settling dusk, she noticed a young American guard observing the new arrivals with unusual intensity. Private First Class John Miller, 22, from Omaha, Nebraska, recently transferred from combat duties due to minor shrapnel wounds, maintained professional composure. Yet something about the dignified exhaustion in the Ausiliaria's posture caught his attention. Neither could have predicted that within 60 days they would risk court-martial and imprisonment to exchange their first forbidden conversation. Neither imagined that this moment, two enemies separated by war, ideology and regulations, would transform both their lives with irreversible consequence. Camp 334 near Pisa operated with mechanical precision that belied its hasty construction. Completed in 37 days during autumn 1944, the 11-acre facility housed 2,147 Italian detainees by April 1945. The women's section occupied the southeastern quadrant, surrounded by 12-foot fencing topped with barbed wire. Unlike German POW camps with their Geneva Convention protections, Italian detention centers existed in regulatory limbo after the September 1943 armistice. The Repubblica Sociale Italiana's forces, including Maria, were classified as surrendered enemy personnel rather than prisoners of war, creating ambiguous status and treatment protocols. Barracks 7F, Maria's assigned quarters, housed 38 women in a 120x 30-foot wooden structure. Each detainee received an iron-frame cot with cotton mattress, 2 Army-issue blankets, and 1 footlocker measuring 30x12x15 inches. This represented luxury compared to her final months with retreating RSI forces, where 4 hours of sleep on concrete floors had been standard. Military records indicate the women's section received 3,100 calories daily per prisoner, distributed as breakfast, 700 hours, lunch, 1,200 hours, and dinner, 1,730 hours. The persistent presence of powdered eggs, reconstituted into pale yellow discs that bore little resemblance to actual eggs, became both sustenance and inside joke among the women. Private First Class. John Miller's duties included perimeter patrol of the women's section, 7 hours daily, rotating between morning, 600, 1300, and afternoon, 1300, 2000 shifts. His personnel file, preserved in military archives, details a Midwestern upbringing, 17 months of European theatre combat experience, and a Purple Heart awarded for wounds sustained at Anzio. The shrapnel fragments in his left shoulder, deemed too risky to remove, occasionally caused him to shift his rifle to maintain his military bearing during extended guard duty. The prohibition against fraternization appeared in 17 separate locations throughout Camp 334, reinforced during daily briefings. Military Directive 27B established the minimum communication protocol. Guards will issue commands in English. Translation will be provided by designated personnel only. Conversation beyond necessary instruction is strictly prohibited. The required 15-foot distance between guards and prisoners further minimized interaction. Violation threatened court-martial with penalties ranging from reduction in rank to imprisonment for American personnel. Maria's initial detention classification, Category B, non-combatant, possible intelligence value, mandated weekly interrogation. Sessions occurred in Administration Hut 3, a 20x 15-foot structure with metal desk, 3 chairs, and strategic positioning of windows to allow May sunshine to fall uncomfortably across the interviewee's face. Lieutenant Wilson Peterson, military intelligence, conducted these sessions with professional detachment, assisted by Sergeant Anthony Capriano, whose Neapolitan accented Italian added subtle psychological pressure. After 3 interrogations yielding minimal tactical value, Maria's file received the notation, "Subject has limited knowledge of strategic importance. Technical communications role confirmed. Reclassify to Category C." Daily routines transform strangers into community. Barracks life operated on strict schedule. Wake up, 600. Roll call, 6:30. Breakfast, 700. Work details, 0800 1200. Lunch, 1200 1300. Restricted recreation, 1300 1700. Dinner, 1730. Final roll call, 2000. Lights out, 2200. Camp regulations assigned auxiliary to administrative duties rather than physical labor, acknowledging their military status despite persistent comfort girl misclassification in casual conversation among guards. The first meaningful interaction between Maria and John occurred on May 21st. Military efficiency required Italian detainees to sort and distribute incoming Red Cross packages. Maria, assigned to this detail for her organizational competence, wheeled a cart of supplies past the Northwest Guard post, where John maintained solitary watch. The cart's left wheel, catching on uneven ground, sent 37 packages tumbling across the dirt. Regulations required John to call for female administrative personnel. Instead, he approached, maintaining professional distance but close enough to help stabilize the remaining packages. Their eyes met for 3.7 seconds. Neither spoke. The prohibited proximity, her hands on one end of the cart, his on the other, lasted less than 30 seconds. This unremarkable incident, witnessed by no one, altered the trajectory of both lives. John requested transfer to permanent Northwest Guard duty the following day. Maria volunteered for supply distribution every afternoon. Military records document neither decision's motivation. Their calculated orbit around each other had begun, invisible to everyone but themselves. The Northwest Guard post occupied a strategic position 127 feet from Barracks 7F. A blind spot existed between watchtower sight lines, a 6-foot section partially obscured by supply shed eaves. John discovered this architectural oversight during his third patrol shift. By early June, he had memorized the precise timing, 16 seconds of complete invisibility during each perimeter circuit. Military routine provided predictable windows for forbidden proximity. The 1400-hour supply distribution, the 1735-hour return from mess hall, the 1950-hour pre-curfew head count. Each created legitimate reason for their paths to cross. Maria's English vocabulary in April numbered 7 words. By June 1st, 31 words. By June 15th, 94 words. Her official interrogation file noted, "Subject shows no English language acquisition," a deliberate misdirection by Sergeant Capriano, who had begun slipping her an Italian-English dictionary during questioning sessions. His motivation, documented in a 1967 interview: "My mother was Italian. These girls weren't Nazis. The brass had it wrong about them." Their first actual exchange occurred June 7th during afternoon supply distribution. Maria wheeled her cart past the Northwest Post at precisely 14:27 hours. John, completing his patrol circuit, entered the 16-second blind spot simultaneously. His rehearsed Italian emerged as whispered fragments. "You speak English?" Her response, equally practiced. "Little. Learning." Total conversation duration, 8 seconds. Both continued their duties with outward normality, while their pulses elevated to 115 beats per minute. Camp 334's mess hall received Hershey bars in shipments of 3,000 units weekly. Standard prisoner allocation, 1 bar per week, distributed Sundays. John's first gift appeared in Maria's supply cart on June 11th. A single Hershey bar nestled beneath folded blankets. No note, no direct contact. The chocolate represented 2 days of his PX ration allowance. She discovered it during inventory, understanding immediately its origin and significance. Between June 7th and July 12, 1945, documented interactions between Private First Class Miller and prisoner Draccia IT 7729, Maria Conti, appeared in official records exactly twice. A routine supply authorization on June 22nd and a medical escort duty on July 3rd, when Maria required treatment for minor kitchen burns. Neither entry suggested impropriety. Yet within this period, according to Maria's 1977 memoir, they exchanged 14 distinct conversations, averaging 17.3 seconds each. Every exchange occurred within the 16-second blind spot, requiring precise timing and coordination disguised as coincidence. Italian POW repatriation procedures accelerated after Germany's May 8 surrender. War Department Directive 17C-44R established screening protocols to identify dedicated fascists requiring extended detention versus those eligible for immediate return. Camp 334 processed 40 to 50 repatriation interviews daily beginning June 15th, Maria's scheduled interview, July 17th. This impending deadline intensified their fragile connection. John's regular post allowed him to observe her daily routines from legitimate distance. Maria performed her duties with deliberate patterns he could anticipate. Their elaborate choreography, appearing random to observers while actually precisely calculated, represented mutual risk and deepening emotional investment. Army regulations prescribed dishonorable discharge for fraternization. Italian detainees suspected of inappropriate relations with guards faced isolation and repatriation delays. The turning point came July 9th. Camp Supply Officer Lieutenant James Wilson, conducting inventory, discovered a shortage of 7 chocolate bars from weekly PX shipment. Suspecting theft, he initiated heightened supervision of supply distribution. Maria's cart detail suddenly included a second Italian prisoner, Sofia Ricci, a former fascist party secretary with reputation for strict adherence to rules. The blind spot meetings became impossible. John's response revealed the relationship's evolution from curiosity to commitment. During evening mess on July 10th, he volunteered for overnight infirmary guard duty, an undesirable assignment typically avoided by regular guards. Maria, recognizing opportunity, reported to the infirmary at 2200 hours complaining of severe headache. The night nurse, understaffed and overworked, assigned her to bed number 7, separated from the guard post by only a canvas partition. Between 2300 and 200 hours, they whispered through this thin barrier for 174 continuous minutes. Their conversation, unmonitored, unrecorded, but recounted in later interviews, marked their transformation from cautious strangers to intimate confidants. By morning, they had exchanged life stories, shared fears, and made promises neither knew if they could keep. The night nurse's log recorded only Italian patient, WIT 7729, headache complaint, administered aspirin 2200 hours, patient discharged 0600 hours. The institutional documentation failed entirely to capture the profound connection forged through darkness and whispers. 4 days later, the barriers between them would irrevocably fall. Maria Conti grew up in Ravenna, 4 kilometers from Byzantine mosaics she visited every Sunday after church. Her father, Giovanni, taught mathematics at the local secondary school, while her mother, Lucia, operated a small tailor shop specializing in wedding attire. Before the war, their modest 3-bedroom home housed 7 people: Maria's parents, her elderly grandmother, 2 younger brothers, and Maria herself. The dinner table stretched barely 1.8 meters, requiring carefully choreographed movements to serve family meals. This childhood home was bombed in 1943, killing her father and youngest brother. Maria joined the Ausiliaria 3 weeks later, seeking structure amid grief. John Miller's hometown of Omaha stretched across flat Midwestern plains, where winter temperatures regularly dropped to 15 degrees C. His father managed the meat department at the local A&P grocery store, bringing home unsold cuts on Tuesdays and Fridays. His mother taught piano to 27 neighborhood children, her lessons echoing through their 2-story craftsman home every afternoon from 3:30 to 7:15. Before deployment, John had completed 2 years at Nebraska State College, studying agricultural science with plans to modernize his uncle's 120-acre farm. His draft notice arrived during final examinations, May 1943. He departed American shores 47 days later. Their revelations to each other, whispered through infirmary canvas or exchanged in precious blind spot seconds, gradually constructed bridges across ideological divides. Maria described her initial belief in fascism's promises: economic revival, national pride, ordered society. She recounted growing disillusionment as promises crumbled into brutality, shortages, and defeat. John shared his Midwestern perspective: democracy as ordinary reality rather than abstract ideal, abundance as expected condition rather than propaganda fantasy, freedom as practical daily experience rather than political slogan. Between July 10th and July 24th, they manufactured 8 separate opportunities for conversation, totaling approximately 36 minutes of direct communication. Each interaction carried escalating risk. According to 1945 military regulations, their developing relationship constituted a Level 2 fraternization violation, punishable by court-martial with maximum penalties of dishonorable discharge for John and indefinite detention for Maria. Military statistics from European occupation zones documented 147 formal fraternization charges filed between January and July 1945. Of these, 41% involved American personnel and Italian civilians or detainees. The less adversarial relationship between Americans and Italians compared to Germans created contextual ambiguity that both complicated enforcement and facilitated connection. On July 19th, Maria's repatriation interview resulted in Category Green classification, eligible for immediate return to civilian status with monitored movement restrictions. This designation, applied to 78% of female auxiliaries, acknowledged her limited role in fascist military operations. Her scheduled release date, August 12th. The countdown intensified their desperate arithmetic: 24 days remaining, then 23, then 22. Their concealed relationship might have continued undetected if not for a fundamental miscalculation. On July 24th, Maria received her weekly letter allocation: 1 sheet of paper, maximum 250 words, subject to censorship. Rather than writing to her mother as usual, she composed her first letter to John, detailing her feelings and memories of their conversations. She entrusted the sealed envelope to Sergeant Capriano during his regular mail collection, believing his demonstrated sympathy would ensure delivery outside official channels. Her trust proved catastrophically misplaced. Capriano's sympathy extended to dictionary provision but not to direct rule violation. He submitted her letter to Lieutenant Peterson as the regulations required. The unauthorized communication underwent standard censorship review, revealing their forbidden connection in Maria's own handwriting. Camp security protocols activated at 0745 hours, July 25th. Maria faced immediate isolation in Detention Block C, a 6x 8-foot cell with single observation window and limited amenities. Military police intercepted John during morning roll call, confiscating his sidearm and escorting him to administrative headquarters. Their separation occurred without opportunity for eye contact or acknowledgement. The preliminary investigation assembled evidence with methodical precision. Maria's letter, Exhibit A, guard post assignment records showing John's requested northwest position. Exhibit B, supply distribution logs documenting Maria's regular 14-27-hour schedule. Exhibit C, and infirmary records revealing their simultaneous presence overnight July 10th. Exhibit D. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Hayes, camp commander, reviewed preliminary findings at 1300 hours. His handwritten note in the case file revealed pragmatic calculation rather than strict discipline. Political sensitivity high. Italian repatriation program priority. Minimize publicity. Recommend immediate separation and resolution without formal proceedings. This administrative decision, designed to avoid negative press coverage during delicate post-war diplomacy, would temporarily spare them court-martial. By 1700 hours, transfer orders were prepared for both. Their physical separation would span 4,117 miles by morning. The emotional distance would prove harder to measure. Transfer Order R117 redirected Maria to Transition Facility 22 near Naples, 437 kilometers south of Camp 334. The journey lasted 11 hours in a crowded transport truck carrying 17 female detainees. Military Directive 45C classified her case as administrative separation, priority repatriation, accelerating her civilian processing rather than extending detention. Her new quarters measured half the size of standard barracks, a 10x 12-foot room shared with 3 other women awaiting return to civilian life. The facility housed 1,142 Italian detainees in final processing stages, all scheduled for release within 30 days. John faced reassignment to the 88th Infantry Division, stationed in northern Austria, 643 kilometers from Pisa. His personnel file received the notation, "unsuitable for detention duty," rather than formal disciplinary charges. The absence of court-martial reflected Lieutenant Colonel Hayes's pragmatic approach to potential publicity concerns as American-Italian relations normalized. John departed Camp 334 at 0430 hours, July 26th, without opportunity to collect personal items from his quarters or communicate with anyone regarding his sudden transfer. Letters between them should have been impossible. Military postal regulations explicitly prohibited communication between former guards and detainees. Yet American efficiency created unintended channels. Maria's repatriation paperwork included forwarding address registration, standard procedure for tracking former detainees during occupation. This information, processed through 6 separate administrative offices, eventually reached the Records Division, where Technical Sergeant Eleanor Rodriguez maintained personnel rosters, including transfer locations for reassigned guards. By September 1945, the military postal system carried their first exchanges. John's letter reached Maria at her mother's apartment in Ravenna 27 days after he wrote it. Her reply, mailed through civilian channels now accessible to released detainees, found him 31 days later. Between September 1945 and February 1946, they exchanged 17 letters, averaging 834 words each. The correspondence crossed 6 international boundaries and passed through 14 postal processing centres to maintain their connection across post-war Europe. Repatriation statistics for Italian detainees showed 94.3% return to civilian status by December 1945. Maria received her full release papers on August 17th, documenting her as the 19,127th Ausiliaria, processed through the Allied repatriation program. She returned to Ravenna carrying 2 possessions from her detention: a dog-eared Italian-English dictionary and a single Hershey wrapper carefully preserved between pages marking the words "tomorrow" and "promise." March 12, 1946. Ravenna, Italy. Maria waited at platform 3 as the 1437 train from Bologna arrived, carrying 247 passengers. Post-war Italian railways operated at 63% of pre-war capacity, with schedules more aspiration than certainty. This particular train arrived 17 minutes late. Among its passengers, a former private first class from Nebraska stepped onto Italian soil as civilian John Miller for the first time. His honourable discharge, finalised February 9th after 847 days of military service, had freed him to pursue the promise contained in 23 exchanged letters, totalling 19,182 words. Their reunion occurred between Platform 3 and the station cafe, a moment captured in a blurred photograph taken by a fellow passenger. The image, preserved in their family album for decades, shows only indistinct figures embracing while 3 suitcases rest forgotten on the platform. The statistical reality of their relationship places them among 14,371 documented marriages between American military personnel and European partners between 1942-1950. Of these, 3,127 involved Italian spouses. The immigration process demanded precision and patience. U.S. War Bride Act provisions expedited foreign spouse entry, but required extensive documentation. Marriage certificates, character references, medical examinations, political screening, financial guarantees. Their application file, preserved in immigration archives, contained 37 separate documents weighing 1.3 kilograms. John's former commanding officer, Captain William Hennessy, provided character testimony. Miller demonstrated exemplary conduct throughout his service, with exception of one minor disciplinary incident that reflected poor judgment rather than character deficiency. They married April 17, 1946, exactly 1 year after Maria's initial capture. The ceremony took place at Ravenna's municipal building with 7 witnesses present, including her mother and remaining brother. The bride wore a navy blue dress with white collar, material sourced from repurposed military uniform fabric, a common post-war adaptation. The groom wore his civilian suit purchased in Vienna during terminal leave, size slightly large across the shoulders. Their visa approval arrived June 23rd. Atlantic passage aboard SS Marine Flasher departed Naples July 11th. The vessel, converted from military transport to civilian service, carried 7,019 people, including 212 war brides from 6 countries. Their cabin measured 8 x 10 feet with twin bunks and communal bathroom facilities shared with 16 other passengers. They established their first American home in Omaha, a 1-bedroom apartment measuring 680 square feet, renting for $37 monthly. John completed his agricultural degree using GI Bill benefits, while Maria worked at Marshall's department store alterations department, earning $0.75 hourly. The 1950 census recorded them at 1423 Maple Street with their 2-year-old daughter, Catherine. Their story represents one statistical thread among millions in post-war reconstruction. Yet this singular connection between former enemies crystallizes broader reconciliation between nations. The Italian comfort girl and her American guard demonstrated personal transformation that paralleled international healing. Their unlikely love, born in war's aftermath, produced 3 children, 7 grandchildren, and a family narrative spanning 2 continents. When interviewed for a 1985 documentary about war bride experiences, Maria summarized their journey with precision. "We were supposed to be enemies. Instead, we discovered we were simply people. That discovery saved us both."